Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 13th of January 2025. We're going to start with Lithuania, who are to deliver 4,500 drones to Ukraine this week. They are valued at $5.1 million. In the coming days, they'll arrive in Ukraine. That's fantastic. Lithuania, of course, are a massive supporter of Ukraine, as are all the Baltic states. First photos have appeared confirming, and I reported this the other day, that the Defence Forces are armed with a Shield AI MQ-35A VBAT drone, resistant to Russian electronic warfare. The drone operator started from about 40 kilometers from the front, flew 100 kilometers past the front line of the troops, and then found these 11 Buk air defense systems, targeted them, and called in HIMARS fire. So I reported this in my hits and losses video, but just thought I'd let you know that these are in Ukraine. These are drones that take off vertically like that. They're pretty large, but they are resistant to electronic warfare and have a range of 480 kilometers, traveling at 90 kilometers an hour with a flight time of 10 hours, flying up to 6,100 meters, equipped with electro-optical and mid-wave infrared cameras. Very useful for the Ukrainians. Indeed, they appear to be having some success in drawing in HIMARS strikes on high-value targets. Now, talking about funding for NATO, the expenditure on our own defences, as a percentage of GDP, etc., etc. Amadeus here says, everyone is still way too focused on the amount spent instead of what it is spent on. Sorry, Canada, but for example, look at Perun's video about Canada's spending, or take the UK or the US spending, or like we in Finland have spent less than 2%, like forever, and still we manage to have up to 20% of the population ready to defend. It's rare that we have gone much above 1.5%, often a bit below. So this is interesting because it's not only a mathematical issue with, or not mathematical, but a like-for-like comparison. So, for example, as I keep saying, the US includes healthcare because they've got a privatized system. The healthcare spent on the armed forces is, something like 6%, 7% of their DoD expenditure or something like that. It's a lot of money. And if you're including that in your defense expenditure and another country isn't, then you can say, oh, you're not spending enough because look, we're spending this much. But actually included in that are elements that you wouldn't include because you've got a nationalized universal healthcare system. So that, a soldier goes into a normal hospital, their families, veterans, they all go to the same national hospitals, and you don't have to take it out of the DoD budget from some kind of insurance payments, etc., etc. So you have those issues, and there are many other issues like that. But also it's like, what are you spending it on? How is it that Finland are able to spend less but actually have a much more up together defense forces? And, should that be taken into account? For you bad at math, it's the same as the UK having 13.6 million trained and 3.4 million, that's 5%, as a wartime army before you are in a war. I use the UK because the UK has spent almost always above 2%. My point is that someone spending 1% wisely can have a better defence force than someone spending 5% on special one-time use toys usable in certain conditions. Big caveat here to Amadeus, because the UK is one of the only two nuclear deterrent forces in Europe. And there will be people piggybacking NATO countries, European countries on France and UK having nuclear deterrence, and we pay an absolute arm and a leg for that. So out of our expenditure, and it didn't used to be, so our I was speaking to my mate about this, who's just come out in the Navy. He was saying it used to come out of our foreign budget. I guess it was deemed as like a national deterrence, as I don't know, it was part of that budget anyway, and they moved it into the Department of Defense, or the Ministry of Defense, which has caused a massive uptick in expenditure there, and so therefore that takes up a huge proportion of what our defense budget goes on. So it goes on nuclear and upgrading certain things to nuclear capability, etc., etc. Lots to do with nuclear, a lot to do with pensions as well, it has to be said. so I'd be careful with using the UK and saying, well, look, we've got essentially way more troops than you, but we also have nukes and you don't, so it's difficult. But anyway, my point is that someone spending 1% wisely can have a better defense force than someone spending 5% on special one-time use toys only usable in certain conditions. So instead of always going to the not comparable spending percent because of so many differences, then maybe instead look at how the countries can contribute per capita in case of war and what is the best way of them to contribute. Yes, I mean, my always mentioning what the defense expenditures made up of and percentages and etc is that's just a shortcut to say it's complicated, and therefore when we just look at the overall percentages it's not doing justice, and this just adds to that. It's further evidence that it's very difficult to compare country to country. And he continues, how ready is the country to protect its people, and how is the industry plus other infrastructure? Even if Trump doesn't understand it the best, and the only thing the European side should do is start producing 80% of the needed equipment over here and stop buying it from the USA, because in the case of World War, the industry in the USA will manage to supply enough, like they can't even handle the production alone against tiny Russia. So if China has its industry, like China is currently the only part that could make a war against NATO, into something like more than a short conflict. And to those shouting about nukes, doesn't matter what you spend if 5,000 plus nukes lands on this planet, so no point even preparing for that except maybe shelters for the population. So still, how it is spent is more important than how much is spent. So if someone can get 5% of their population trained for 1% of the GDP, that is better than someone getting one carrier group for 2% of their GDP. I get the point. You need both. Like, there's no point having just human beings running around and no carrier group to transport them or to be able to strike with aircraft, right? And if you're talking about wars that are defending NATO, then you need to go over to somewhere else. You know, if NATO Article 5 is invoked over there, then you having a well-trained number of troops over here is kind of irrelevant if you can't get them from here to there. And so therefore you need both. It's both and. But I get the point that these things are complicated. Now, EU arms manufacturers have pushed for military Schengen zone as Ukraine grapples with extended repair times for weapons. 2/3 of Germany's howitzers, says Euromodern Press, sent to Ukraine are awaiting repairs as bureaucratic hurdles slow down the country's combat readiness. I'd like to see what German NATO Ukraine has to say about this, about, you know, whether that's still accurate. 2/3 of the German-provided Panzerhaubitze 2000s are sitting waiting to be repaired. Here is a Panzerhaubitze 2000 firing 4 shots in 29 seconds, whilst also having just hugely unnecessary music playing. Let's listen. Let's just watch this. 29 seconds, 4 shots. Second one goes in. Or the shot. It's not the shell itself. There's the shell. Goes up first. And the shell there below already in place for the next one up. Wow, just incredible. That's insane. 4 in 29 seconds. Absolutely incredible. Now, German aid to Ukraine does chime in on the RCH 155 handed over to Ukraine. That's a remote controlled howitzer, the new one from Germany that's going to be supplied to Ukraine. Transparency tweet. I've deleted my earlier tweet of the RCH 155 with a strange camouflage, as it's apparently not the RCH 155 that Ukraine received from Germany. The one handed over has the usual camouflage, which is also seen in this image. Now, he says, anyway, Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius has confirmed my assumption from Friday, which I had stated in my article, that the now handed over RCH 155 will stay in Germany for the time being and will be used to train the Ukrainian troops. So there's no point giving them all these howitzers and then the Ukrainians not knowing how to use them, so they need to train on them. So those initial ones, RCHs, are going to be used, one would have thought, to train the Ukrainians on. Zelensky has received reports on the situation of the 155th Brigade brigade and ordered the suspension of the creation of new brigades, directing reinforcements to already experienced and combat-ready units, says Yuri Butazov, the journalist who broke the story about the Anne of Kiev French-trained brigade not being, first of all, not having drones. And that was a bit of a controversy, and then being taken apart and being given to different units. And then, some people saying it was disbanded and used by all these other units. Other people saying, actually, no, they are operating in Prokrovsk. They've captured some soldiers. So there's all this controversy about this unit and also desertions, etc., etc. If this is true, then this is really important. So that is Ukraine reacting, adapting to challenges they have, news coming through, people breaking news that this is happening. And rather than creating new brigades, the Ukrainians need to be reconstituting existing brigades and reinforcing them. And that is what the top brass have evidently found out and now changed their minds over, which is good news. Trump's National Security Advisor Mike Waltz suggested that Ukraine should lower its conscription age to 18. So he's following on other Americans who have said similar. And Kyiv faces serious manpower issues and their conscription age isn't even 18. If they're asking the world to go all in for democracy, they should act accordingly. Actually, they're not. I think that's a bit unfair, because they're not asking the world to go all in. They're asking the world to provide weaponry and financial support for Ukraine. If they're asking them to go all in, they'll be asking for all their troops and this to be a war. So, words are important, as I say. But yeah, there is a lot of pressure for Ukraine to do this. There are arguments for and against. We all sit in different places along those arguments. I am someone who thinks they probably should, but I understand why they haven't. I understand the arguments for and against mass mobilization, especially when there's hardly anyone. When you look at the demographic makeup of those cohorts, 18 to 25 that's the smallest number of cohorts they've got, smallest number of people in those cohorts. The 3rd Assault Brigade now trains, but it's an existential war and you need to fight. The 3rd Assault Brigade now trains civilians and soldiers anywhere, anytime, and with a mobile FPV school. They've also expanded FPV training across Ukraine, opening a new school in Lviv as part of the Kill House Academy. Wow, FPV drone pilots Ukraine is going to be training the rest of the world on these. In fact, speaking of that, the Slovakian army intends to train about 1,000 drone operators based on the experience of the war in Ukraine. According to the General Staff, each platoon should have at least one drone operator. For the time being, it's envisaged that conventional, commercially available reconnaissance drones from pre-approved manufacturers will be used. In the future, strike drones are not excluded. The Army wants to start inducting drone operators as early as this year, with instructors being trained first, who will then train other operators. At the same time, Slovakia also wants to start investing in electronic warfare systems. The world is adapting to the war in Ukraine. Poland should not and will not send peacekeepers to Ukraine, says Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz. He emphasized that other countries, not Ukraine's neighbors, should take on this role. So you're going to have the US saying, right, we're not going to allow you as part of NATO, but then Ukraine saying, well, we definitely need a security guarantee. So you've got UK, maybe France, but then you've got other nations like Poland saying, well, we're neighbours, so that's not a good idea to have us in Ukraine. I don't know if that's a dynamic between Russia and Poland, but interesting. I think there could be a bit of an issue here with what's going to... The peace negotiation, absolutely, 100%, and I fully agree with Ukraine on this, requires security guarantees for Ukraine. They are not going to go into a forced negotiation and agree to a ceasefire to allow Russia to reconstitute and regenerate without peace negotiation. Because unless they've got a deterrent force in Ukraine stopping the Russians attacking again, the Russians will just attack again. So that has to happen. So unless the US has got a really good plan of how that works, then their idea of this being sorted out really quickly, I mean, they've already accepted now that was just nonsense. Trump saying that it's going to be solved within a day, and even before the inauguration, we've gone through that. That was a lie. It's now 100 days, 6 months. You had, was it Keith Kellogg saying more about that? Yesterday was at Wolves, saying, look, this is going to take a long time, a bit of a longer time. It's not an easy thing to sort. Yeah, well, we knew that. Now, the UK MOD And actually, this is fitting in line with what I think Rachel Reeves from our Chancellor of the Exchequer said, that basically our growth is going to be somewhat dependent on AI. Interesting. Artificial intelligence. Quote, frontier models in 2024 are trained with 10,000 times more computing power than in 2019. If progress continues at the rate of the last 5 years, in 2029, we can expect AI to be a dominant factor in economic performance and national security. AI is, whatever you think about AI, if we're not ahead, as in when I say we, I mean any person that's speaking, like your country, if your country is not ahead of the curve on AI, another country will be, and that might be China, it might be Russia, and then there are problems. So we all need to be harnessing AI while knowing its either limitations or threats, vulnerabilities, and your SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. But we need to be up there. We need to be at the forefront of AI. Because I think otherwise, it's a kind of probably a zero-sum game. This is going to be at the forefront of all technology, I think, going forward. Shashank Joshi then also quoting from the government Peace Report, AI Opportunities Action Plan, government response. We will take forward the recommendation to expand our sovereign compute capacity by at least 20 times by 2030. As compute needs grow, such expansion is critical if the UK is to keep pace. Well, that's why you've seen Microsoft buying an old nuclear plant in order to enable them to do all the AI computing that they need to. It's absolutely incredible. So there needs to be strategic thinking when it comes to AI. We are seeing it being used on a battlefield in Ukraine to a limited degree at the moment, and I'm sure that's going to get more and more prevalent. Right, Anton Gerashenko says the Russian MOD has reported the first ever battle launch of a Kinzhal hypersonic missile from a Su-34 fighter bomber. This news appeared in an MOD newspaper. Previously, the Kinzhal missile, the Dagger missile system, was used only with modernized MiG-31K planes. The Russian aircraft fleet includes approximately 5 to 6 times more Su-34s than MiGs. This is how Putin demonstrates his readiness for peace talks. This could be a bit of a challenge for the Ukrainians. It's unsurprising. Actually, I'm only surprised it's taken so long. But they are adapting some of their more modern planes to be able to fire some of their kind of best missiles, right? And that's probably not good news for Ukraine. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.